The Ponderosa Ranch made millions of dollars for 37 years. Then in 2004, everything changed. A billionaire bought it and locked out the public forever. What he found on that 570-acre property was never supposed to be discovered. Government officials were crushed when their $50 million offer was rejected. Volunteers rushed to save what they could before it was too late. They found things that didn't belong in a TV theme park. Now, urban explorers risk arrest to see what remains. The ruins hold secrets that explain why the ranch had to disappear. In the late 1950s, television audiences fell hard for Bonanza, the western about the Cartwright family and their huge Ponderosa Ranch near Lake Tahoe. It started in 1959 and lasted until 1973. And at its peak in the mid-60s, it pulled in around 19 million viewers each episode. People gathered around their color TVs every Sunday night and saw the blue water of Tahoe and the deep green pines glowing on screen. NBC pushed the show so it could also push color TV sales, since its parent company was RCA. And soon, that burning map of the 1,000-square-mile Ponderosa, stretching from Tahoe to Virginia City, became a familiar sight in living rooms. The setting was so vivid that fans began wishing they could step into it. And little by little, that wish pushed its way into real life. It happened because of a couple named Bill and Joyce Anderson. In 1962, they settled in Incline Village, which was still quiet and mostly undeveloped on Tahoe's North Shore. Bill was helping build the new town, and because of a twist in his contract, he ended up with control of more than 400 acres of wooded land near the lake. It was almost the same size and the same location that Bonanza used for the Cartwright world. So when the show debuted and viewers saw a map placing the Ponderosa almost exactly where the Andersons lived, curious people started knocking on their door. They asked where the real Ponderosa was, and even though the one on TV was fictional, the interest was real enough to stir something in Bill's mind. More tourists came, and the questions kept coming. And soon the Andersons realized they were sitting on what someone later called a monetary opportunity. In 1965, they reached out to NBC and to David Dortort, who had created and produced the show, and they shared a big idea. They wanted to turn their land into an official Bonanza theme park. NBC executives were shocked at first because Bill had already started calling his property Ponderosa Ranch without permission. Something he admitted caused the studio a bit of horror. But the idea had too much promise to ignore. Dortort and the cast agreed it could be a bonanza for everyone involved. NBC made a licensing deal with the Andersons and even gave them blueprints of the set-built ranch house so they could make a perfect replica. Bill later wrote that he had never tried to be anything but a businessman. He wanted to make money, and he did. Construction began in 1966 on Bill's 570-acre spread of pines and giant boulders overlooking the lake. He hunted for old lumber so he could recreate Ben Cartwright's ranch house exactly as it appeared on the show. He and Joyce built a small Western-style town on the hill above their stables, shaped to look like the Virginia City of the 1860s. NBC sent set designs and props, and in return, the Andersons hosted promotional events. The main cast, including Lorne Greene, Dan Blocker, and Michael Landon, filmed commercials at the ranch and at the replica of the Silver Dollar Saloon. With each appearance, the line between the television world and this growing park blurred a little more. By the summer of 1967, the Ponderosa Ranch theme park was ready. The gates opened, and the ranch became something people could actually walk into. That first day in July brought crowds that were eager to see the Cartwrights' world made real. One account said the park had a full-scale replica of the house and barn, along with a set version of Virginia City. People poured in. Thousands arrived that summer alone. A wooden sign welcomed them, painted with a group portrait of the Cartwrights. At first, the sign did not include Pernell Roberts, who had left the show in 1965, but later, as reruns introduced new viewers to Adam Cartwright, the park added him to its artwork and merchandise. Stepping into the Ponderosa Ranch in its best years felt almost unreal. You passed through the gates, and suddenly it was like you had walked straight into an episode of Bonanza. The ranch looked exactly the way fans imagined the Cartwright world would look in the 1860s, and the feeling stayed with you as you moved from place to place. First came the ranch house. It stood there like a memory pulled out of the screen, and once you stepped inside, the sights wrapped around you. The stone fireplace sat in the living room like it had been warming the Cartwrights for decades. Ben's desk waited in the study. The dining room looked ready for a family meal. Even Hop Sing's kitchen had that lived-in warmth, and yet the guides would smile and explain that the upstairs windows were fake and that the so-called bedrooms had never existed here at all. Those were Hollywood soundstage tricks. They even pointed out where the hidden cameras once sat and how certain walls would slide open during filming. Former employee Diana Hork remembered how guests leaned in close when she revealed each secret. Then they noticed the props. Little Joe's green corduroy jacket hanging quietly. Hoss's tall brown suede vest resting nearby. Fans recognized them in a heartbeat and whispered like they were in a museum of their childhood. A few steps away, everything shifted. There stood Virginia City, reborn as if time folded onto itself. The dusty saloon, the small jail, the bank, the old shops. In the show, the town took a 2-hour horseback ride to reach. Here it stood right beside the ranch yard. Tourists didn't complain. They wandered into the Silver Dollar Saloon and ordered sarsaparilla, while the walls tried to convince them they were inside the show. Then someone would tug them toward the haunted house on B Street, where the ghost town feeling grew thicker. And just when things felt calm, a gunshot echoed from a staged stunt show. Actors burst into mock bank robberies and wild brawls. Children clung to their parents. Adults laughed and shouted at the cowboy chaos. A little farther on, visitors knelt beside a long gold panning trough and sifted through sand for sparkling flecks they could take home. It was simple, but people held on to those tiny gold pieces for years. Even getting up to the entrance felt like a story. Guests parked by the highway and rode in horse-drawn wagons that climbed slowly toward the ranch. Sometimes the ride turned rowdy when outlaws stormed the wagon and pretended to rob everyone. People screamed and laughed and held onto their hats. Those who wanted a real Western moment could pay extra for trail rides on the actual horses from the show. NBC had kept the horses on site to save travel costs, and it worked out beautifully for guests. Early mornings brought the famous hayride breakfast. A wagon full of hungry families rattled toward a meadow, where a chuck wagon team cooked pancakes until no one could eat anymore. One visitor still remembered their 1992 trip and wrote that they went only for the hay wagon ride and the all-you-can-eat pancake feast. It let people pretend they were cowboys, even if just for a morning. Food and souvenirs kept the fantasy going. The saloon grill served the massive Hoss burger, a half-pound monster that left people stunned. More than 3 million Hoss burgers were eaten over the park's 37 years. Many guests posed for photos trying to tackle the giant thing. Down the path, the ice cream parlor scooped flavors like Cartwright chocolate. The general store offered tin cups with the family faces, frontier costumes for kids, old-timey replica guns, and the famous Ponderosa map from the opening credits. Past autographs printed across it made the map feel like treasure. Families walked out wearing cowboy hats, holding toy sheriff badges, and grinning like they had just stepped out of the 19th century. Small touches made the place almost haunting. Right by the ranch house stood a tiny graveyard with wooden markers for Ben Cartwright's 3 wives. Fans already knew each son had a different mother, and the site reminded them how deep the show's story ran. Later, as Bonanza actors passed away, more markers appeared. Hoss, Little Joe, Hop Sing, even Lorne Green. Kids posed quietly beside the markers, not sure where the line between fiction and reality began. Down by the stables, fiberglass horses waited for photos. People climbed up and pretended to ride like the Cartwrights, and tucked off to the side stood a real wedding chapel built in 1871 and later moved to the ranch. During its busiest times, it hosted up to 15 weddings a week. Couples chose the Ponderosa as the place where their own story would begin. All this effort showed whenever visitors toured the ranch house. Someone once explained that only the living room, dining room, kitchen, and office actually existed there. The stairs went nowhere, and the tour took very little time. Yet fans never complained. They loved being in the same room their favorite characters had filled with stories. Diana Horsch said that it was always the Cartwright Ranch House that pulled people in most. Guides turned every missing detail into a chance to teach. The late 1960s felt bright for the Ponderosa Ranch, almost like the whole place was catching its breath after years of crowds and cheers. But when the early 1970s arrived, things shifted. In May 1972, Dan Blocker, the gentle giant everyone knew as Hoss, died from post-surgery complications at only 43 years old. The shock moved through the cast and the fans in a way no one could hide. Still, the Bonanza team tried to push forward. They added a young Cartwright cousin the next season and hoped the old rhythm might return. It never really did. By early 1973, after 14 seasons, the show was canceled. Suddenly, the Ponderosa Ranch Park stood without new episodes to feed people's excitement. Many thought the whole attraction would fade as soon as Bonanza left prime time. One writer even said the ranch had lost its reason to exist. Yet it stayed alive. In fact, it kept breathing for 30 more years. The Anderson family leaned into something softer. They sold nostalgia and simple Western fun. Bonanza reruns still aired in 98 countries, bringing curious visitors from all over. And for families driving through Nevada, the Ponderosa was just a friendly Western stop, even if they had never watched a single Cartwright adventure. A 1971 Nevada tourism magazine had already called it a must-see and put the cast on its cover. Kids laughed as stuntmen pretended to fall off rooftops during gunfights. They clapped for can-can dancers in the saloon without caring if those routines matched anything from the show. The place had charm. The Lake Tahoe scenery helped. And even when tastes changed, people still came. Nevada magazine later wrote that some visitors came to relive the golden days of Westerns, while others came because it was simply a fun place to be. During the 80s and 90s, the owners kept polishing things to keep the crowds interested. They built a Mystery Mine funhouse into a hillside. Inside, floors tilted, lights flickered, and mirrors played tricks, giving guests a strange Western twist on the famous mystery spot idea. The town area also gained an antique auto exhibit, with Model T cars and old stagecoaches, so visitors could feel a mix of the 1800s and early 1900s in one walk. In 1999, a VHS tour of the ranch appeared in the gift shop, letting families take home a narrated walkthrough of the whole property. Even as pop culture drifted elsewhere, the park leaned into its retro heart. It became one of the biggest seasonal employers around Lake Tahoe. Many local teens spent their summers flipping Hoss burgers or guiding trail rides, feeling proud as they wore their cowboy costumes to work. Behind all this, the people running the ranch were changing too. Bill and Joyce Anderson, who had built the whole thing together, divorced in 1995. It was amicable, but still the end of a long chapter. In 1996, Bill stepped back. He was in his 70s and ready to retire, so he handed the ranch to his children, Royce and Ghislaine, along with Ghislaine's husband, David Geddes. The younger generation now had to navigate a tougher tourism market. Big theme parks were rising. Las Vegas was booming with new mega attractions. A Western park without high-tech thrills started to look old-fashioned. By the late 90s, Bonanza's original fans were aging, and younger guests often didn't recognize the Cartwright names. Attendance dipped a little, though it never collapsed. Royce and Ghislaine tried to keep the soul of the ranch intact while still exploring new ideas. They even looked into selling the land to the U.S. Forest Service so it could become a public historical site instead of a private attraction. But the talks dragged on for years with too many forms, funding delays, and unclear answers. Even so, the ranch kept running well. Royce later said it stayed successful until the very end. And in 2004, something surprising happened. The season became one of the best they ever had. As the final days approached, Royce said, "This is the biggest year we've ever had." That same summer, rumors began spreading. People said the land might be sold. Fans grew nervous. They wrote letters. They started petitions. They begged the Andersons not to close the gates. The family issued a statement saying that after years of struggle and success, their children had decided it was time to move on. They thanked the fans and acknowledged the pleadings coming from around the world. But the reality behind the decision was simple. The land had become incredibly valuable. The family received an offer they could not turn down. In July 2004, news broke that tech billionaire David Duffield, co-founder of PeopleSoft and a resident of Incline Village, would buy the ranch. Government agencies that had hoped to buy the land for conservation were stunned. They had lined up more than $50 million for a public purchase and pictured hiking trails, open space, and parts of the park preserved for visitors. But Duffield's offer was private, fast, and a little higher. Reports placed it around $55 million for the 570 acres. For the Anderson family, it made business sense. David Geddes explained that the government plan felt too complicated and uncertain, while Duffield was ready to move now. Even so, the moment felt heavy. One Nevada official said the state team was crushed. They had poured time and effort into trying to save the ranch for the public. Duffield told locals he had no immediate plans to develop the land. He said he understood its meaning as a gateway to the community and wanted to prevent reckless construction. But he also shut the park to visitors almost right away. On September 26, 2004, the gates closed for the last time. The Ponderosa Ranch ended its 37-year run. Royce Anderson watched the crowds that day and said softly, "It's really the end of an era." The final weekend felt both joyful and heartbreaking. People rushed in for one last look at the Old West. On Saturday, the ranch saw 2,200 visitors, the biggest September day in its history. On Sunday, September 26th, the final day, 2,350 people arrived, the highest single day ever recorded. Many came in cowboy hats or Cartwright-style vests. They grabbed souvenirs until nothing was left on the shelves. Even the displays vanished into shopping bags. Food ran out. Drinks ran out. Royce later laughed and said the ranch ran out of everything, including beer. Yet even that laughter carried a hint of sadness. When closing time came, no one wanted to leave. Royce said people lingered near the gate, hoping to be the last ones out. Staff had to gently guide them toward the exit. Some cried. Some took slow photos. Some whispered goodbye. Diana Horch, a longtime employee, later remembered it as a sad day for all. To her and many others, the ranch had been a second home. Fans around the world filled forums and inboxes with memories. Some quoted Bonanza's theme song. Others simply wrote, "Thank you for the memories." One fan started a petition called Save the Ponderosa and gathered thousands of signatures in only a few weeks. Nothing changed, but the love was clear. Even David Dortort, the show's creator, felt the loss deeply. He had always imagined the ranch as a living link to his work. Now it was slipping away. Commissioner Herb Santos, a loyal Bonanza fan and Nevada tourism official, put it plainly. The park might have opened well after Bonanza's heyday, but it was still wildly popular. That truth made the end even harder to accept. The ranch did not close because people stopped caring. It closed during a peak year, with about 250,000 visitors in 2004 alone. Royce explained it in simple words. It was time to move on. After the gates closed in 2004, the Ponderosa Ranch fell quiet in a way that felt almost unreal. Those pine-covered hills above Lake Tahoe, once filled with stagecoaches, ringing boots, and families laughing in the sun, now sat still. David Duffield put up fences and warning signs, and just like that, the public was shut out. The Cartwright land that had welcomed millions was no longer a place anyone could walk into. Yet the bones of the old park stayed there for a while. The ranch house, the barns, the saloon, the little outbuildings that once buzzed with life all stood empty, waiting for weather and time to do their slow work. Winter in the Sierra Nevada does not wait for anyone. Paint started to crack. Wood soaked and split. Roofs sagged. With no staff to keep everything tidy, the whole place began to fall apart. And of course, people grew curious. Some fans slipped through the woods, hoping to grab a piece of their childhood. Rumors spread about people stealing bits of the Virginia City false fronts, or trying to pull the Ponderosa Ranch sign off its frame. A few trespassers were caught, but that only made the stories travel faster. Soon, urban explorers treated Ponderosa like a secret challenge. They whispered that the empty town was haunted. At dusk, a few claimed they heard hoofbeats on the empty trail or saw a shadow of a man in a big hat leaning on the ranch house porch. Maybe it was only the wind stirring loose boards. Maybe it was only a dream. But for a place built on stories, these new ones fit right in. By the late 2000s, the slow decay became a real concern, and something unexpected happened. Duffield did not tear everything down. Instead, he reached out for help. The Thunderbird Lodge Preservation Society stepped in and treated the ranch like a fragile attic full of history. Volunteers came with care and patience. They removed wagons, buggies, vintage cars, mining equipment, and all kinds of signs. They saved what they could before weather or vandals finished the job. A few structures were taken apart piece by piece so they would not collapse. One of those structures was the Little White Church. It first stood in 1871, then moved to the Ponderosa in the 1960s. And after the park closed, it was moved again. Volunteers labeled every plank, lifted every piece, and sent it more than 300 miles away to Lemuel, where it was rebuilt with the same gentle love. Bill Watson joked that the church had quite a travel record, but inside it still felt like the old days. Couples now marry there again, far from Lake Tahoe, but close to the memories the place carried. Even the Cartwright Ranch house was not lost. Watson's team numbered every log and stored them in containers. They hope to rebuild it someday. As of 2025, those containers are still waiting for funding and approval, but the dream is alive. Imagine walking into that living room again, the place where so many TV scenes played out and so many tourists smiled for photos. Saving it was a small miracle. Around 2010, the site was mostly cleared. Anything too dangerous or too far gone was taken down. The rest of the land slipped back into its natural shape. If you hike there now and look carefully, you might spot faint lines in the dirt where wheels once rolled. Duffield also donated part of the land to a trust, so it stays protected. Today, when you drive up near Incline Village, you only see a locked gate and trees behind it. The Ponderosa theme park is gone, yet the pull of the place never faded. Old souvenirs pop up on eBay, from tin cups to ashtrays to those prized maps with the autographs. Some of the rescued pieces appear in the Nevada State Museum or in displays in California. People who visited the ranch decades ago still talk about it with soft eyes. Joanne Paolillo, who grew up going there and later worked there, meets fans all the time who tell her how much the place meant to them. It was simple, it was warm, it felt like home, and even with the land closed, the idea stays alive. Ponderosa sat in hearts, long before it sat behind locked gates. The story stretches further. Long before the world talked about immersive fan experiences, Bonanza's Ponderosa offered exactly that. It gave people a chance to step into a TV world they loved. For baby boomers raised on westerns, the Cartwright Ranch felt almost personal. Seeing it in real life was like walking into a memory. Decades later, Bonanza still airs on classic channels and streams online. New generations discover it. There is something steady and comforting about its tales. When that map flares into view and reveals Lake Tahoe, people still wonder if such a place existed. And for almost 40 years, the answer was yes. The ranch boosted the local economy too. Hotels and restaurants drew business from fans. Even a Bonanza steakhouse franchise, unrelated but inspired, appeared because the name carried so much weight. The park also lived on in film. 3 Bonanza TV movies in the 1980s and 1990s used the site. A 1987 pilot for Bonanza, The Next Generation, shot scenes there too, though Lorne Greene sadly passed away before he could return as Ben. The ranch became part of the show's world even after the original series ended. And then came something new. In 2020, the Nevada Commission on Tourism approved a grant to help rebuild parts of the Ponderosa Ranch in Lemuel. Foundation 36 and the Thunderbird Preservation Team began planning an exhibit using the original saved structures. The idea was simple: give the Ponderosa a new home in the Northeast where fans could walk through again. The ranch house, the church, and other pieces would rise once more. The goal was to honor Nevada's film and television history and let future generations feel the magic. Commissioner Herb Santos said he always regretted the park's closing and was thrilled to see a chance to share the memories again. If all goes well, visitors in the coming years will step through that familiar ranch house door. Maybe they will touch the same doorknob someone once cried over. Maybe they will stand by the hearth or sit in the pews of the little church. It won't be Lake Tahoe, but the heart of the place will be there. Still, for the old fans, nothing will replace that quiet morning air in Tahoe. The smell of pine drifting through the wooden streets. The sight of horses waiting by the fence. Those moments are locked safely in memory. And the truth is, even as buildings fall or forests reclaim the ground, something remains. A line from the show says that home is shelter against any storm. The Ponderosa became that kind of home for many, a place of comfort and imagination. Now in its faded state, it reminds us how easily beloved places can slip away if we do not hold on. Yet, in the falling apart, there is a strange beauty too. Nature slowly takes back the Wild West that television once built, while the echoes of laughter and old cowboy songs drift through the mountain wind, keeping the story alive.